Can you tell me about the beginning process here? When you got the script, was the story always told from the found footage or POV perspective?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I thought was really interesting from the very first draft I read was that it already had that conceit. The father documentary element was already part of the structure. Of course, as we were developing it, we explored further the ideas and saw how much we could push it. Also, when you read the script, it's funny because there's a lot of elements that work conveniently for the script that once you're trying to, actually, stage them and make them become a reality, you realize that there's so many places where it would be very tempting to cheat. And found footage films, tend to cheat quite a bit, much more than you would think they should. And so the moment you're trying to actually put things together and figure out the best way to do it, you do have to actually work out quite a few issues. There was a few elements that I think were developed much more in post, which were, the use of the split screens. In the script, the split screens were suggested here and there, particularly in the last act, to kind of play with the tension more. But we felt that actually, the sooner we played with them, the more it would help enhance the idea of, almost this Big Brother type of situation with cameras everywhere in the ship. And it would help sell the idea more of the fixed cameras, because strangely enough, in an early cut where we didn't use too much of the split screens, it would take you a while to actually realize that. It seems really strange to be saying this once you watch the film in its final form, but it actually took a while to really connect with the fact that you're only seeing the action from these fixed cameras. Once you get carried, into the story, you forget the perspective, and we actually felt we needed to remind the audience quite a bit early on.
And you kind of stumbled into one of my next questions there. With found footage movies, a problem I see come up all the time, almost all the time, is having no motivation for a character to be filming the action or including some sort of perspective that doesn't really fit in logically. So do you have any instances where you really wanted a certain shot, but it just didn't make sense to have a camera there?
Well, there was one moment, and we justified it in a weird way, which is actually when the ship finally lands on Europa. You have Katya going to the porthole and looking out and seeing Europa for the first time. And basically what we did is we used James's video camera, the one that he uses during his tour, and they set it up, next to the porthole, so that they're also capturing that themselves. And basically what we do see is his camera's perspective through the window, and we see her reflected on the window. So it allowed us to have more of a subjective perspective from the character, but it was, we justified it with the camera. And if you look at the wider camera in the cockpit, you see James's camera set up there. So it's but it was a little bit of a challenge because it was it had to be, it had to make sense that it was there. And actually without giving away one of the big reveals in the film, there's another moment where that camera is used with Rosa, with the pilot, and that proved to be pretty tricky to work it out so that it would have the same impact that it had when I first read it on the script. On the script, there's a big reveal towards the end of the film about something that's being shot that we didn't realize was being shot in the actual ship, and the ship being so small and so contained, it was very hard to find actually a spot where to shoot this. We really had to think it through, so that there's a moment when you realize, oh my God, these shots were actually part of what was being taped inside the ship, and it's a really cool reveal. To me in the script, it was one of the most crucial scenes, but it was difficult to make it happen. But then again, from the very beginning, both with the production designer, with Eugenio Caballero, and the cinematographer Enrique Chediak, one of the things that we all really liked about this project was the fact that a lot of the limitations from the conceit of the film could actually work for our advantage. You know, a lot of the visual language I thought was a lot more interesting, and there was different you know, like a different set of tools that we would have in the film, such as, you know, instead of, you know, the typical found footage film where you have a shaky video camera that looks really crappy and you don't understand how in a moment of crisis people are still shooting everything. Here suddenly it was, you know, the camera's inside the ship, and if they're getting degraded, it's because something major is happening in the ship, and you actually play with that. You know, if the focusing system breaks down, and then you have one of the main cameras, shooting a character being out of focus, and it's, you know, basically the hero shot for that character for Rosa in the third act. It actually added a lot of tension. You know, it actually brought a lot more, and in another film, using something like that just would be a mistake. But here, it felt, you know, it was appropriate, and it actually contributed to what we were doing.
What kind of cameras did you shoot on?
They're the Silicon Imagen 2K cameras, which are basically these tiny cameras. You know, and you see them, you know, on screen at one point when James points to one of the cameras. That's the actual camera that we shot with. Basically, it's a camera body that's tiny. The lens is on top of it. It's about the size of literally of an iPhone. You know, a little thicker. But the whole system, you know, it goes, you know, through a cable. It goes into a whole, you know, the deck itself, where, you know, where the image is processed and recorded, is separate. Those cameras were used. Enrique, actually, the cinematographer, had used them before on 127 hours, because they needed really tiny cameras there to go inside the little canyon and work in really extreme, you know, places. And he said he had a really tough experience working with them there because of the cabling system and everything. It was, you know, when you're out in nature in a removed area, you know, the technical aspect of those can be, you know, can be time consuming, and he at first he told me, I'm never going to use those cameras again until this film came about, and he was like, no, those are the perfect cameras for this film. For this, they would work really great, and visually they you know, they're amazing. They look incredible, and it was really cool to actually incorporate them into the set. You know, the set was, you know, we built the two levels of the spaceship in a stage actually here in New York, in Brooklyn. And we set up 8 different cameras, you know, all around the ship where they would have been placed.
Were there any parts of the ship designed for the cameras, or for maybe other equipment, like removable walls or spaces that shouldn't have technically been there?
Well, not really. I mean, of course, there's things that, you know, there had to be an entrance, an exit, and there were things that you would have to be able to move. For instance, when James is doing his tour, you know, we had Enrique actually doing the camera work for that on wires going up inside there. But the set had to work 360 degrees, you know, since we had cameras everywhere. You had a top view from the cockpit. You had, you know, 5 cameras at the bottom part, 3 cameras on top, and when we had a major scene, all 8 cameras would be rolling simultaneously, which was really cool and immersive for the actors. In terms of also lighting, you know, we were using the practical lights from the set. The actors were mic'd. It was really a unique experience in that sense. I don't think I'll ever go through a similar shoot again, just because it's what this called for. But it was also really tough directing basically from outside that. You know, I had to talk to the actors through a microphone. You know, I basically played mission control the whole time myself, and it was very fitting, but it was very strange at the same time.
That must have made editing crazy too. So you had 8 cameras, and they'd all basically be rolling for every take, and then you'd have to sort through the footage?
Definitely. Well, the thing is, we had a very short, actually, shooting schedule. So we would roll, you know, the full scene, you know, whenever it was possible. If it wasn't like an effects, you know, a physical effects scene or something like that, we would shoot the whole scene, and then we had all that footage, which is what also allowed us to play with the multiple screens as much as we did. You know, we had all the footage there, but the editing, you know, we ended up shooting for 19 days and then editing for 10 months. So that gives you an
Makes
idea
sense.
of how things got complicated later in post.
And was there ever an instance, because you had that option to use so many different things, like most people are just choosing between,
Yes.
take one or take two. You've got the split screen there. You like,
Yes.
the box in the corner, it should be, and like sorting through everything for that
Yes.
one shot.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, it gets even more complicated than that. I mean, you have the split screens, but on top of that, you have screens within the shots. You have monitors going on, and those monitors, we put the images that are there later in post because there was a lot of things that required VFX. So you have the 8 different cameras, you have the monitors inside each screen.
Were those monitors actually playing something while they were on set, or was that green screen after?
It was mostly put afterwards. There was a couple of things where whenever it was something that didn't involve actual action, then we had something playing, but very minor stuff. Most of them we had to fill them later, and it has to be accurate, and it has to be what should be there. A scene like the spacewalk becomes really a huge mess in terms of you have all the different split screens going on, but then when you have the characters inside and they're looking at the monitors and the character and they're seeing what's happening outside, you have to fill that in as well. And now it was an editing nightmare, but it was also one of the coolest things about the film was see how far you could push that.
And now, how about working with your actors here too? Because you want a performance to be natural in any film,
Yes.
but with POV and found footage, it's kind of the utmost importance, or the film doesn't work. So
Yes.
did that change your approach as an actor's director at all?
Well, what was weird is that because you had this immersive environment and you had basically almost like a performance piece going on inside the ship, everything had to feel, it had to feel very real, but you couldn't use also the usual tricks of, okay, you have a close-up for the specific moment, or you have a camera pushing in on the actor when there's a big reveal. No, here everything had to happen from the same angle. So if you need a close-up, you need the actor to reach that spot, and it has to feel organic. It has to feel natural. It can't feel too staged or it starts falling apart. And it actually becomes really nice to have some of the actors suddenly be off screen for a crucial moment, not everyone being placed in the perfect position. And it's funny because some actors, besides whatever skill they have and however good they are at really expressing their emotions, which is, the most crucial thing, but being natural with placing themselves in the right spot, some people really have it, and some people it takes them a little bit, it takes a little bit more of an effort. But overall, I think the fact that they were immersed in the situation, it was very unique for everyone, and it actually, I think, helped them. But yes, the acting had to be very, very natural. You have to believe the situation they're in. You have to believe exactly what they're going through is real. If it's a photo documentary, more so than any other in any other type of filmmaking, I think.
And really, how believable is the situation they're in? As presented in the film, I bought it.
Yes.
But in real life, perhaps doing research to make sure everything is authentic as possible, because no one's been on Europa before.
No one's been in Europa, and that was, one of my big concerns was, we're recreating a world that we haven't seen, at least from that perspective. But there's a lot of things that we do know and that we can play with. I was, even from an optical perspective of where you are, when Katya goes out and she's doing her surface walk, I wanted to make sure that the size of Jupiter in the sky was the right size, that we weren't, blowing it up out of proportion just to make it look, cooler or flashier. No, that we would play with the actual proportions. A lot of the scientists who advised us, the science advisors from JPL, who are like the Europa specialists, of the world right now, they were very happy with the final portrayal of the surface of Europa. There are little details like when you look at a documentary about space, one of the things that you notice is you don't see stars unless you're exposing for the stars. That was like a big decision early on. I said, if we're exposing for the spaceship, then the sky becomes black, and it's actually a black void that helps the story, that plays really well with what's happening. But it's you know it's a tricky decision because you're so used to seeing most space movies with stars in the sky. Actually, Kubrick didn't use stars, and when you see the surface of the moon in Space Odyssey, you don't see stars in the background, and that's a great detail. You know, it's one of those things that both science buffs and some great science fiction fans.
Never gonna watch a sci-fi movie now that thinking of that.
Well, the thing is, one of our biggest references were actually documentaries, more than the there's obviously the great masterpieces of sci-fi that you have to watch, and that they're part of the process. But on my end, the one film that I would have everyone who came on board the project watch was For All Mankind, the documentary about the Apollo missions, which is actually one of the greatest and most entertaining and thrilling pieces of filmmaking I've seen about space. And there you look at this amazing footage, and it's all real. There's and there's nothing in there that you see a starless sky when you're looking at the shots of the moon or the shots from the Apollo, the lander or what have you, and it looks just as amazing. You don't necessarily feel you need that. So it was cool to try to be as realistic as possible and to actually play with those elements as much as we could. I think they actually helped potentialize more what we were watching. Make it. There's so much you can play with, and so many amazing things. I think within real science and within the technology behind space travel. Of course, there are some small liberties here and there, but pretty tiny compared to all the things that we really I think stuck to in making sure that everything was depicted realistically.
And how about just putting yourself in this situation? Because for me, part of the fun here was, just wondering, do I want to risk my life to make this incredible discovery? But then I'm looking at, one of them has family at home.
Yes, of course. I don't know if I would go on a journey like this. That's why I make movies, and I don't, and I'm not an astronaut. But I think you have to make it believable. One of the tricky things, actually, and it was one of the things that came up over and over again when we would talk to scientists, is they were really worried. When you would talk to a scientist going through the situation, at first, I put myself in their shoes saying, well, I would freak out, I would not be able to carry on in the same way. And they're like, no, well, but an astronaut, for instance, is trained to go through the most extreme situations and to think them through clearly. And a scientist who's making such a huge discovery, they're not gonna suddenly freak out and start, hunting whatever they found down to destroy it or getting out of there. Actually, for them, they would be really excited about seeing something, seeing a sign of life for the first time outside of Earth, and even if there's implicit dangers in that, those dangers ultimately, and the risks involved in pursuing that are tiny compared to their motivation behind making that big discovery. So it was interesting to find the right balance in their psychology, so that we can still identify with them. We can still feel like, okay, they're real human beings who are going through all the fears and all the issues that you would have on a journey like this, sacrificing so much. But at the same time, they are scientists. Their huge passion is behind this, and they're not, they're not going to fall apart whenever there's a crisis, as big as that crisis could be.